This is our new rotating exhibit room. So that's the permanent exhibits over there in those two rooms. This room we hope to have temporary exhibits so we can constantly have new things for you all to see. And I'm happy that this is our new Fireman exhibit. And we have as our special guest Carr, who has been a volunteer fireman in St. Helena for over 20 years. And he's been so kind as to share some of the artifacts that he's been collecting over all the years. And Art is a great treasure trove of information and stories. And so he's going to give an informal presentation today, whereby he can, kind of introduce you to the history of firefighting in St. Helena, which started in the 1800s. So I think there's a long bit of time to cover there, but Art, do you want to take it away?
Good afternoon. I hope everybody can hear me. We have 144 years to cover. And I don't know how we're going to do it in 20 minutes, but we're going to try. The 33 years of the three private companies were together from 1878 to 1911. In 1911, the St. Helena Fire Department was formed. The first three were the hose company number one, hook and ladder company number one, and then America's company number two. This all started, the story starts when they were looking for water. And when the community of St. Helena was formed in the mid-1850s, they always knew that up on Spring Mountain was about the best source of water they could acquire with the city. But there was nobody wanted to step forward with any financial aid or any knowledge of how to do it until about the mid-1875, 74, 75, when a group of men got together with some money and the knowledge to construct and go through all the litigation that they would have to go through in order to get the water rights up on Spring Mountain and the property right-of-ways to bring the line down to the county road. Main Street used to be the county road. So they started, they got their group together. They started negotiations with the property owners. John York and David Hudson, elders of the community, were a considerable amount of help to these gentlemen because they knew the area. They had a lot of water rights on the York Creek, so they were willing to give that up. And so, also within the community, there was a gentleman by the name of W.T. Simmons, and he was a Civil War military officer who had come to St. Helena, and he had knowledge of organizing men and getting groups together, working together. And he had wind of the people working with the dam and bringing the pipe down. And there had always been talk about forming a fire company in the community, but no water. They couldn't do anything. They relied on their bucket brigades. So he went around and tried to get talking to the business people, getting them interested, and they were all for it. So they were holding meetings, getting their bylaws together, getting their rules and regulations together, going through all the everything needed to bring this company together. And in the meantime, all of the water rights had been secured, and everything was fine there. They started building the dam, laying the pipe down, and by the early part of 1878, they had the water line down to the county road. and we're bringing it up into Main Street. And that's when the gentlemen got together and finalized the formation of the hose company. They had gone ahead and ordered a postcard from the foundry, from the carriage maker in San Francisco. They paid $150 for it without any hose. It was just strictly a wagon with a hose reel on it, and that was it. Tongue and this grid panel to pull it with, and the order was set for about mid-September, October. So the water line had got to the county road. They were bringing it up into town. They come through town with it, and they laid 6 fire hydrants on Main Street, and 2 coming up Spring Street, and 1 clear down on East Troy Road. On Main Street, they set 4 hydrants in the main business district, starting at Adams Street, in the corner of Adams and Main, come down halfway between Adams and Hunt, set another hydrant at Hunt. They set another hydrant that would be at Telegraph Alley, and then down at the corner of Spring and Main was at 4, and then 1 this side of the bridge, just a little bit past Hope Street. So when they ordered this hose cart, it was just a hose cart. It wasn't equipped with anything. It was bare. So one of the men, by the name of J.J. Dickinson, was a founding member of the hose company that was about to be formed, stepped forward and purchased 150 feet of hose to be laid in front of each of the 4 hydrants from Adams to Spring Street. So it was 100, 100, 100, 100, which was 600 feet of hose. And they would pull this into or store it into the stores or whatever that were located right about where all these hydrants were. In case there was a fire, they could get the hose out at the hydrant and be ready for the hose cart when it came down. And it all could be hooked up and hydrant turned on and hit the fire. And if you go up and down Spring Street now, instead of the 6, there's about 18. From Pratt Avenue down to about where Scott's restaurant is down on the other side of the bridge. The men that started the water company, started the construction of the dam and laying of the pipe, would go on to become the Salina Water Company. And they would control the water rights and all the selling of the water to the community of Salina until later part of 1930. And at that time, they sold it to the city of Salina. And after they had got done with Main Street, they also went around to all the streets within the community, laid a water pipe and city hydrant, so everything was very well set. And let's see. So on August, I've got to take a drink of water. So on August 29th, 1878, hose company number 1 was formed. Their first foreman was a fellow by the name of Joe Hoskins. He had a first assistant, a secretary, and a treasurer. And their first headquarters was around the corner from 1201 Main Street, which is the vintage antique shop, corner of Main and Spring. Right behind that building where Money Way is. Money Way wasn't there in those days. There were just some buildings back there next to the William Tell Hotel. I think the William Tell Hotel is still there. And this is where they set up their first headquarters. And the landlord gave them rent-free for a year. How about that in this town? How about doing it today? So, and then the talk started about an alarm bell. So they took up donations within the community and were able to dig up $50 for an alarm bell out of the foundry in San Francisco. So it was supposed to be, in fact, it was inspected by a bell inspector. It said it was a good sound bell, it would give a good tone, and you could hear it for a long ways. Well, they had it shipped up here, and the men built a tower by the firehouse, and they raised it up to the top of the tower, and big ceremony, and they pulled the rope on the bell, and it went ding. And they pulled it again, it was another ding. And it wasn't going to work. So off the tower it came, went back to the foundry, more negotiations. The foundry set up a larger bell, supposed to be better bell for another $85. So the total bill for the bell was $135. So they had to get more money more donations for the to pick up the rest of the tab. And so they put it up on the tower, and it went dong, 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 and you could hear it all over town. So that's exactly what they wanted, and they were happy. So they stayed there until 1883, and then they moved right around the corner over here to the corner of Oak Container, just a couple of steps from where we are right now. And they built themselves a 2-story town hall with the council meeting upstairs and the fire company downstairs. So everybody was moved in, the tower was moved over to the new town hall. The bell was set, and then they decided to spend another $125 and build a belfry up on top of the council chambers to mount the bell, and they did that, and they put the bell up there. But then they noticed that when they get more than 12 people up in that town council chamber, the building wanted to move all over. And everybody's eyes would get big, and they would sit down and hold a chair. They were afraid it was going to fall down, and everybody was afraid it was going to fall down. The council decided the best place for them to hold their meetings was downstairs in the fire department chambers, so they abandoned the second story and moved downstairs. So they had a council chamber and a department downstairs. Upstairs was vacant. They stayed there until 1890, when the city bought the property over on the corner of Adams and Main for the city hall and the fire department. And then they moved the bell over there, raised the bell up onto a top of a new belfry that they built. And it stayed there until 1954, when the city had a bond measure. I think it's on one of these posters. They built the new city hall, the one that's abandoned now. So they took it down, took the bell and stored it in the corporation yard. It stayed in the corporation yard until 1962, when a local historian by the name of Ivy Loper discovered that it was down in the corporation yard, started a campaign to move it out of the corporation yard and put it up at the firehouse, which they did. The firemen poured a concrete pad for it, put a plaque up there, and they had a ceremony, mounted the bell on that. It stayed there until 2005 when they built the new firehouse. And there's a picture, where is that? Right there, one over there, it shows where they're taking it down and where the bell is hanging at the new firehouse. So there's also a lot more to that story than I have time to. But this is what I like about this, is that you get in some of these little things, it goes off into different trails, and sometimes you wonder where it's leading you, but these guys had a lot of fun when they were in those days. And so W.T. Simmons, after that election, the formation of Hose Company 1, they elected or appointed him the chief engineer. Now I'll go into that in a few more minutes. But in the meantime, the hose carts that we call hose carts were actually called jumpers by the firemen. We call them jumpers because they could jump the curb, they could jump over rocks, over rough ground. They had no problems with anything. And the same with the four-wheel wagons. They call them trucks. In 1884, Hook and Ladder Company was formed with 12 men. They were the first company to charge an initiation fee. They charged $3 to join, 25 cents a month dues, and 25 cents to 50 cents fines for not attending meetings, attending drills, or doing some kind of infraction against the company, like drinking too much, destroying property, and stuff like that. And by 1885, the following year, they had a total of 26 men with a full assignment of what they needed. And Fred Sterling was their first foreman. And Fred, from back east, he had been a volunteer fireman back east. He knew firefighting. He knew how to drill. He was good with men. Everybody loved him. He was a good man. And their the first truck that the Hook and Ladder Company bought, the city bought it for them, cost $850. And it was loaded with ladders, two ladders that you could tie together to extend up to a two-story building. They had leather buckets for the bucket brigade. And the bucket brigade never stopped just because they were getting these jumpers going and this hook and ladder truck going. They always had the buckets for people, because there was always a crowd around the fire. And there's always people who want to do something, so they were working the buckets all the time. And besides the ladders and the buckets, they had axes and picks and shovels and chains, fire extinguishers, and they had what they call a pike pole. The pike pole was a long pole about 8-10 feet long, and at the end of it has a spike. And on the spike it has a hook. And this was used to push down walls, push down fences. The hook was to grab that material and pull it away from the fire. And you could pull anything, brush, whatever you had. And that brings up something else. There's three elements to a fire. Fire with a hole is like a pyramid. Okay? Down here is the fire, would be the fire, the base of the fire. Up here is the fire. In this triangle, there's three elements. Up here is oxygen. This could be the heat, the fuel, and this could be the heat. You take any three of those away from that fire, and you can control that fire. Fire breathes on oxygen, It breathes up, it eats the fuel, and the heat generates fire. So many forest fires, these wildfires, it's a roar because the heat is pushing that fire and the oxygen, burning the oxygen, and it's a rumble. It's like if anybody's ever had a chimney fire, you'd be sitting at home nice and comfortable, watching TV, sitting in your couch, and in the background you kind of hear something, boom, 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 and something that you had never heard before. And that boom, boom, boom keeps getting louder and louder. And all of a sudden, you look over toward the chimney, and the chimney's and you can see the chimney, it's where it's coming from. And by the time it's roaring, well, what has happened is the heat has ignited the carbon inside the flue. And it's got that on fire. If you were to walk outside, it would look like 4th of July. Everything's went out there. Well, the first thing you should do is to take a deep breath and go over and call the fire department. Seriously. Because a lot of people get hurt thinking they can do it themselves. Some people are successful, other people aren't. And there's a chance that you could get hurt doing it, or there's a chance that you could get burnt, or there's a chance that you could destroy your property. Because the sparks might get on your roof, ignite your roof, and you have a fire. First thing to do, call a fire department. No matter what you know about with knowledge of fire, call the fire department. That's what they're there for. That's their job. And no matter what neighbor Bob says, he might laugh at you because you call the fire department on a chimney fire or something that you couldn't put out yourself. It doesn't matter. It's safety first. That's what matters. Hang on, I gotta fix this.
I know.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so we were at the Hook and Ladder. Right, their first headquarters was just south of the Oddfellows Hall, over there on Main Street, at 1346 Main. That would be about where the real estate office is, or the Patina jewelry store, or the show, right in that area right there. And in 1886, the mayor of St. Helena, and by the name of York, Mayor of York, urged one of the businessman by the name of Alfonso N. Bell to form another hose company. And he went about talking with his buddies on Main Street, and he came up with 23 men to form this company. And they formed it on August of 1886. Their first foreman was a gentleman by the name of J.G. Johnson. And their headquarters was right directly across the street from the Oddfellows Hall at 1359 Main Street, about right where the model bakery is. So you had two companies on Main and one on over here, right here at Oak Street. And their first jumper was that unit right there with a big picture. And the city bought that for the America's Hose Company for $375. We have parts of that in storage at the department. I think that was the one that used to be stored at City Hall for a while until it became such a derelict piece of junk that they moved it to the city corporation yard where it remained and turned into dust, and all that was left was the steel. And we have the steel shoes, the axle hubs and axle and the hose reel axle and the frame. I would like to restore it, but it's too expensive. There's no way in the world we could restore it. We could go out and buy a unit. And that arched piece of decoration over the top has America's on it. Somebody in town has that. It's in somebody's garage or, you know. And my mind went blank for a minute. So, okay, all right, and getting back to the chief engineers. W.T. Simmons was elected chief engineer in 1878. He served until 1886 when he retired. And then Fred Simmons was elected. Fred Simmons had been the foreman for the Hook and Ladder Company. Fred lasted 2 months. As good a man as he was, he lasted 2 months because he committed the cardinal sin of the fire department. He turned in a false alarm. And he turned in the false alarm to get the men out of their house to drill. And they knew it. They all came to the alarm. They got their jumpers out, and their trucks out, ready to go in the fire. Nothing doing, but instead they were drilling. It dawned on them it was a false alarm. The town council got wind of it. So there was kind of a big row about that. Fred took it personally, and in a way he should, because false alarms they're not allowed in any circumstances. Somebody could get hurt for nothing. We used to go on some false alarms, but it was kind of a pleasure when the wineries were putting in alarm systems for fire in the early 60s. But they weren't perfected. And a little bug goes there, the alarm system would set it off. So we took many a midnight ride down to Rutherford PVD Winery in the middle of the night, ice cold, hanging onto a truck or up to a crude winery or some of the others. We only had about 5 in the valley in those days. But some of the rides were worth it because we came back with a couple of boxes full of things. So we never complained. So anyway, then, after Fred left, he left the community shortly after that, moved to Calistoga and joined the volunteer fire department up there and became very successful. He was a good man. He just made a mistake, and he didn't his presence would work anymore in the community. Anyways, so Ben, my name of R.B. Ben Bell, picked up his after he left, and Ben would serve until 1896. 1896, another man by the name of Willie Hoffman picked it up for 1 year, 1897, and in 1897, Ben's brother, Alfonso N. Bell, the man that had started the America's Hose Company, took over as chief engineer and stayed there until 1911, when the Helena Fire Department was formed. There's some notes that says that Philo Grant was elected or chosen to be the chief engineer, but I can't find too much record of that, so I'm just going with 5, up until from 1878 to 1911. And there's some people get the chief engineer and the chief mixed up. The chief engineer of the 3 companies, his only responsibility, his one main responsibility was to the town council. His other responsibilities was to hold drills within the 3 companies and to direct all fires within the city. That's all his responsibility was. He could not meddle with the financial affairs of the companies or the discipline or anything. That was the foreman's job. Whereas the chief, nowadays, from 1911 on to the present day, his job is to take care of everything, all the financial situations within the company, and everything within the company he's responsible for, and directing fires. So there is a difference. People get confused. But after 1911, there were no more chief engineer. And then we have the hydrants. There's this one right here. There's an explanation right here for it. It's a bump hydrant. It's a takeoff from the horse hydrant. In the cities like San Francisco, the foundries would put a big ball right on the top of that bonnet right there. And when they would run their steamer wagons or steamer trucks to the fires, or their hook and ladder trucks to the fires, they would station the pumper or the hook and ladder truck to where they wanted. They would unhook the horses, take them a safe distance away from the fire, and tie them to a hydrant that had that big ball. And as mechanized equipment started taking over fire departments, they were cutting those balls off. And I don't know what they're doing, but anyway, everybody got mad about it, so the foundries filled in the void in their molds and just made these things with a little bump, so that became a bump hydrant. This one over here is a newer hydrant. Actually, at the fire department, we have an older model. This is what they call almost a mushroom, because the shape of the bonnet here. But during World War I, they perfected how to cast these hydrants and be able to thread them and be able to work the valve, water valve from the outside, rather than having to take the bonnet off with all these screws and poke down in there and drop their tools down in there and create a mess. So that solved that problem. So in 1914, when mechanized fire apparatus was getting popular, Philo Grant, the chief, started talking to the city council and getting them interested. And so Philo and his lieutenants started making a few trips to demonstrations. They went down to Redwood City, where they had just bought a brand new Schneer pumper, 1915 Schneer, for a water demonstration. And they were very impressed with it. They also went to Vacaville and Marysville to watch the Seagrave demonstration and watch the LaFrance. These were all fire apparatus manufacturers. And Rio Truck stepped in, but all they wanted to sell was a truck. Nobody was interested in that. So they talked it up, and they decided to call for bids. And LaFrance and Seagraves come in at a $6,000 figure, stripped truck, was just the truck, and that was it. Ladders, hose, all that other stuff was all extra. Whereas Schneer came in with a $5,400 figure, fully loaded, with ladders, hose, fire extinguishers. It even had a 40-gallon chemical tank on it. So after some discussion, they decided they would go with the Schneer company. They contacted Schneer. They wrote up the paperwork. It came up. Paperwork was signed with a 120-day delivery date. They signed that in February of in 1917, February of 1918, they received a truck. 1 year. And the plate number on it was number 8. Schneer made 8 trucks. And Schneer is the last one they made. The first one went to the city of Redwood City. 5 of them went to, 5 tractors went to the city of San Francisco. A tractor was a short wheelbase Schneer with a 5th wheel setup on the rear. And the city used those out in the sand dunes of San Francisco. They would take the front end off of the steamer engines and the front end off of the hook and ladder, the trucks, make a 5th wheel conversion like what you see today with a pickup and a travel trailer. And their station was Station 12 up at the Haight-Ashbury, up at the end of the Panhandle of Golden Gate Park. And their due location was out to the Great Highway at the Pacific Ocean and all the sand dunes beyond 19th Avenue in that area. And they on the rear wheels, they applied chains, like snow chains, so they could converse over the sand dunes. Because there were a lot of houses out there that the wealthy people from inner San Francisco would build their summer homes, go out there. And anyway, that's what that was for. But and then the Schneer was number 8. No, excuse me, number 7 is missing. Nobody knows where that Schneer is. Nobody. At the firehouse, we have a EFD on the plates on the Schneer. I've often wondered, I've been to every city in the state of California with E on it. I can't figure out where that came from yet. Still looking. Okay, then when they got to Schneer, there was $5,040 due. The key of the city of St. Helena had $5,738.16. And everybody in the city hall went bananas. Because after they paid the bill, they only got $378 left. They laid off the city attorney, they laid off the city clerk, they laid off the city health officer, they laid off the janitor. They shut the lights off in town. Everything. They didn't say what happened after that, but something must have happened because we're still here. But they had a hard time living that one down because they had a whole year to save enough money for this thing. So what they did, I don't know what they did. So we had to share, and thank goodness we had to share. But in 1919, had a big fire out of the corner of Pope and Main. People had been burning brush or leaves over on the other side of the tracks about Church Street. And they left the fire unattended. The wind came up and blew the embers of the fire over onto the blacksmith shop that was on the corner of Pope and Main. And above the blacksmith shop was a residence, a 2-story. Next to that was the Grand Hotel, a 2-story building. Fire got into the shingles on the roof of the blacksmith shop, jumped over to the Grand Hotel. By the time the alarm had sounded that everybody was moving, within minutes the fire had jumped to the Twitchell Carriage Garage, which was a 2-story building. By the time they got the Schneer hooked up to the hydrant at Spring Street, All three of those buildings were on fire, and it was threatening the Colombo Hotel, which was a sitting about location of the bicycle shop. Right in there, right where they were. And years prior to that, they had built a building, the old Galleron building has the two big pillars set in front of it, where the Star office used to be. And on the south wall is a block wall, stone wall, stone. And that's the only thing between that and the water that the shear was pouring on the Colombo Hotel was the only thing that saved that part of the city of Salem. Otherwise, the fire would have gone clear through. Up to Hunt Avenue, hard telling what would happen when it hit Hunt Avenue. They blistered all the paint on the shear, and that's where the myth comes that when the shear arrived, it was painted gray. But the reason why it was gray was the fire beat all the paint off the damn thing. That's what the old timers used to tell us. Yeah. When I joined the department with all these old timers that had been around since 1900, Eddie Benoit, Jay Paulson, all of those guys. Jay Paulson was a member of the Sulphur Creek Boys Band, and they were, and the more they drank, the better they got. Jay would come to our fireman meeting. He'd get on the piano and he'd start banging on that old piano at the firehouse. We still have the piano, but the more he sipped, the better he got, and it was really fun. He could really play out some tunes. He was a good pianist, a good musician, really great. And in 1920, a sanitarium hospital called, or got word down to the fire department that they needed help up at the sanitarium. The laundry was on fire and they had no water to put it out. And at the old sanitarium, as you go up to the hospital, the road's still there. But on the left, where the parking lot is, used to be a mercantile store and a post office. And next to that was the laundry. And the old hospital was off to the right. All gingerbread, it was old wood. You know. And it was threatening to burn that down. So they got the schneer, and the schneer went up there, and it pulled that hill with nothing. They said it just went right up off the hill. And they positioned the schneer up behind the hospital a bit, because the hospital had a indoor swimming pool with a roof over the top of it. And they broke a hole in the roof, dropped a drafting hose down into the swimming pool, drafted the water out to feed the fire, to put out the fire in the laundry. Saved the laundry, saved the hospital. So that engine has, and it's been on many, many fires. It's got quite a history. I don't have time to go through everything. A lot of it's in this book right here. There's a lot in that book. And then, also in 20, the city put a bids out for a one-ton truck, engine, frame, four-wheel frame, and I don't know, Nick Coy might know more than I know about this. Henry Ford, any color he wanted with black. Okay.
Yeah.
How about the engine and the transmission and the rear end?
It's all black.
All the same, weren't they?
Yeah.
Huh?
Except the real early ones.
Okay. Well, anyway. So Henry Ford's saying was, if you can have any color you want, as long as it's black. And the same thing extended to the one-ton truck that the fire department bought, because they put a bed on it, and they put some chemical tanks on it, and the damn thing wouldn't run. It wouldn't move. It was too heavy for the truck. So they had to abandon it. So I always thought it was the same engine they put in a touring car that Henry used to make or something, a regular Model T.
It's probably a Chevy.
So anyway, they had to abandon that, get rid of it. No good. In 26, they bought a Rio. And they did the same thing with Rio, but that Rio with the 6-cylinder engine was just the thing they needed. It could go anywhere, and they loved it. And it worked. In 1933, they bought another one. This one they put a tank on. That's this one right here. Right here. And in this picture, there's Smokey Grant. Philo Grant is here, and this is Walter Metzger. I think he was the mayor of the same way. And that picture is taken on the corner of Adams and Railroad Avenue at the old Pitchard building. Pitchard building in the background, right back there. And that unit stayed in the department until the 50s. And at that time, they either sold it to somebody long before my time, but it wasn't there when I got it. And then 41, they got a white open cab, which they ran until about 80s, somewhere in the 80s. And at that time, they sold it to the Harvest Inn down by White Silver Springs Road. White Silver Springs acquired it, put it in the garage for about a week, then pull it out and let it sit outside and just deteriorate. It just went to nothing, ruined. The people at Harvest Inn sold their business to another company. That company donated the white back to the St. Louis Fire Department, and the boys at the firehouse stripped it down to nothing, completely redid it, brand new. Mm-hmm. And that's the one you see running around for parades, giving the kids rides, and whatever the firemen desire to do with it. But it's there for the community. In 1943, the civil defense during World War II made the department, David Department is two 6-cylinder Marine Chrysler engines. One was set on a 2-wheel trailer with all the firefighting equipment, and it could be pulled by a pickup or a automobile. The other was set on skids, and it was set behind the City Hall on Main Street permanently. At the end of the war, they must have taken it back. It wasn't around when we were there. And in 1949, the city acquired a surplus 1943 Ford 1.5-ton front mount pump, which we used for a first responder until 1965. And at that time, we acquired the 1965 International Open Cab, which we used, I don't know how many, until 1990, somewhere around there. And it was the first white unit of the fire department, which we christened the Ghost. So it was Ghost 1. I think the department's on Ghost 2 now, Ghost 2 or 3. 3. So it continues. So these resuscitators over here, the one with the lug motor, that was the first one acquired by the department. And it was carried on the schnur. I don't know where in the world they carried it on the schnur, because there's no room. The passenger must have carried it in his lap, because there's no room to carry it. It was donated. They got it through their dance proceeds, the Fireman's Dance. They used to have a lot of those up until World War II. World War II, they discontinued them and didn't pick it up until the 1950s. And then they carried those on until the 1990s, and they discontinued that also. The bigger one over there was donated by the 2030 Club, 1931. Those two bottles that are in there are carried in a separate case, but it still takes a couple of men and a boy to pack some of that stuff around. They're awfully heavy, terribly heavy. And these other two right here are just ones that have been donated to the department over the years. Okay, so that's about it. I didn't know.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for some questions. And I have a question for you. I have a question for you, Art. How long is this exhibit going to be here? Nancy, do you know, or?
Well, it's under debate.
It's under debate. Okay, so
According to the fire department, how long they're going to let us have it.
You what?
how long will the fire department let us have this exhibit?
We're taking it down today.
Okay, so.
No, I don't know, Nancy. I'll find out. I'll let you know.
We're hoping at least.
The only thing that I don't want anybody in here unattended.
Right, that never are.
Through the end of May?
Yes.
Possibly through the end of May. So if you want to see, there's a lot of information here. This is really, cool stuff to look at.
A lot of stuff is self-explanatory.
Yeah. So, any questions?
How are those early fire departments funded? How are the early fire departments funded? Where do they get their financial aid from?
Well, the city at first didn't give them anything at all. And that brings up another story about money, because the difference between a paid fireman and a volunteer, there's a lot of difference. The dictionary says if you volunteer for something, you don't get no money at all, no compensation. But if you receive any compensation at all, you're not a volunteer. But in a way, they are volunteer. But from the beginning, when they would go out on a fire, and they would fight a fire, a grateful homeowner or business owner would always slip a coin or two in a well-lined pocket. So these guys had a couple of coins going back to the firehouse, and that answers the question about how did the equipment get back to the firehouse. It was a little late because they probably stopped off at a watering hole down here. But and other times, the property owner might make a donation to that department. Okay, say 10 guys worked that fire for Hose Company 1 with their jumper, 10 guys, and he donated $10. At any time during a year, like most likely at the end of the year, the department would sit down and take a vote on what they wanted to do with the money that was in the kitty. And they had two funds. They had their general fund and they had a slush fund. And the slush fund was for their parties, their liquid libation, and all the other stuff that went along with it. Okay? That's where this money was. So the secretary would take down the names of the gentlemen, 10 guys, the fire, the date, the amount of money. At that vote, if they decided to keep the money in the general fund, or put the money in the general fund, or put it in the slush fund, or give it to the individual men. So if the men wanted it, each one of them would earn $1. Okay, so that went on for years. Eventually, the city would give the departments a little bit of stimulus money to buy miscellaneous things for the department, and that would go in the general fund. These slush fund kind of, you might say, lasted until about the 50s when the city started paying the department members $1 a drill and $1 for each fire that they attended, whether it be a false alarm or a hot fire. And so that continued on for years, and over the years they have increase the amount of pay until a day. And that also brings up something else about, and I forgot, you guys probably want to go home. But here a while back, when I was going to talk about these resuscitators, did I answer your question on that?
Yes, you did, thank you.
Okay, great. I looked up some information on medical aid, and in 1965, just 1965, just for a ballpark figure, 1965 to 1970, 1965 we had 3 calls for medical aid, 1966 were 4, 67 was 0, 68 was 1, 69 was 2, 1970 was 4, for a total of 14 medical aid calls. That's heart attacks, that's falling out of bed, whatever, whatever they do. 2021, there was 419. And it's gotten so bad that the volunteer fire department, these guys up there couldn't do it during the daytime. So in 2018, they finally had to bring 2 paid men in during the day from 8 to 5. And then during the night, the other guys could work it, and the weekdays they could work. Years ago, most of the guys worked on Main Street or worked within the area they could empty. That's those days ago. And now it's gotten to the point where they've had to go full time. So there's where your tax dollars go, guys. But it's worth it. You guys do good work. And don't be afraid to call them. They won't laugh at you. They'll help you.
Stephen has a question.
Art, you keep talking about the guys. When did women join the department? You keep talking about the guys. When did women join the department? When did you have women in your group?
He calls them the girls. They're over here. When did you get the women? They're right there. He brought flowers to the
Too much echoes in here.
The question is,
When was the
when
first?
did the women start joining as
Oh, I don't
firefighters?
know. Pete, when did they start?
Ronnie's daughter was the first.
Jennifer Browning.
I think the date's on there, isn't it?
1997.
Yeah, she was the first woman firefighter, yes.
Jennifer was the first one. Megan Mathey was the second. We have another one there, Ann Gay.
Yep.
I don't have a picture of her. Nobody else has a picture of her.
She's a
And then
nurse
Gail
at this
Sharpstein
hospital now.
was the secretary for years. And she's the granddaughter of Ben Sharpstein, the one that the gentleman that started this Calistoga Museum up in Calistoga. And then
The gay gal,
Dorothy Gard there was the one that spearheaded the construction of the new firehouse.
Who?
Jane Gay's a paid fireman, I think, in City Oakland.
She's a nurse up at the ER.
Right now?
She was in
She
July.
was a paid fireman in Oakland.
Wow.
City Oakland.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Enjoy yourself, everyone, and there may be some snacks still left. Help yourself. And thanks for coming. Come back and see the details.
Megan is,